Let's kick off our list with our number 10 spot, Dollys Dip. Situated on Disney's famous Matterhorn bobsled ride, a tragic event occurred. A woman by the name of Regina Young, otherwise known as Dolly, tragically passed away after falling from her bobsled and getting struck. The reason for her falling was due to a faulty seatbelt along with improper safety procedures. Following the death of Regina Young, workers at Disney reported that every time they had to do a routine nightly checkup of the track, they would always feel like they're being watched and would feel that presence more so when they hit the part of the ride in which a fatal accident took place, which was a sharp decline. Workers also reported hearing the cries of a woman in that area and voices warning them of the potential danger in that certain section. They report hearing the words, "Don't go there." Other workers have even decided to quit altogether so they can say they dolly dipped out of there. Coming in at number 9, we have the human bones in the Pirates of the Caribbean ride. This expensive and popular attraction is a Bayou boat ride that lets guests travel through the world of pirates and real human bones? Yes, I said real bones. It was reported that when it was first built, the developers were so strict on the realism aspect of it all that they brought real human skulls from the UCLA Medical Center to meet their high standards. Eventually, as technology improved, they began to make realistic skeletons to replace the real ones, saving them from further controversy. Today, Disneyland states that there are no longer human remains on the ride, but others are convinced, saying that some remains still exist, including the skull on the headboard of the ride. It's definitely creepy to decorate a ride with actual human bones, but we think that Jack Sparrow would approve. Here at number 8, we have the Monorail Runner. The monorail in Disneyland is an efficient, useful source of transportation to get all around the park. It was so useful as a source of transportation that in 1966, a 19-year-old recent graduate by the name of Thomas Cleveland decided it was a good idea to sneak into the park by walking along the monorail track. This idea was not smart. The monorails were high up and there was no area for him to move if a train had approached. He eventually got caught by security, and upon trying to escape, the boy found himself in front of an oncoming monorail with nowhere to go. He would meet a sad fate. After this incident, many guests have reported hearing footsteps above them where the monorails are. Others have reported to workers that they had seen a person running on the tracks at night, but upon investigation, nothing was there. This sad case of trespassing should warn everyone to not challenge Disney's safety regulations. Coming in at number 7, we have the infamous fire department. Near the entrance in Disneyland, above the fire department, is Walt Disney's old private apartment. You can see his window on the top of the garage, and in that window is a lamp that is kept on every single day. It was said that Walt Disney himself would turn on the light to let guests know that he was in the park. However, after Walt Disney had passed away, a custodial cast member went up there once to find out that the lamp turned on. She turned it off, only to find out that the lamp had turned right back on by itself. Whether this is a ghostly wish from Walt Disney himself or not, the park has decided to keep the light on at night to give tribute to Walt. It's believed to this day that Walt's spirit lives in the firehouse as footsteps are heard in the room when the park has closed or when no one is in the house. Taking our number 6 spot, we have the Mr. OneWay Ghost. Mr. OneWay is a spirit that reportedly haunts a Space Mountain attraction at Disneyland. Described as a large man with red hair and a red face, many have reported seeing him on the ride and then disappearing without a trace by the end. Hence why he's given the name Mr. One-Way Man. Legend has it Mr. One-Way died on the ride due to a fatal accident in the 1970s, and his soul has never left the place. He is said to ride in the seats of those who choose to go alone, just like in this video on the surveillance camera depicting an apparition riding in an empty seat. So if you're going alone to Disney, either find a friend or go in even numbers and maybe this ghost won't introduce itself. Here at the number 5 spot, we have the Bellhop Ghosts. At the Tower of Terror, there are many animatronic ghosts here and there. However, many guests and the worker bellhops have said that they've seen real ones instead. The story goes, a bellhop working on one of the 4 platforms had died unexpectedly. There are 4 platforms, Alpha, Beta, Charlie, and Delta. It was platform Delta where the bellhop had passed away, and ever since it's been reported to be haunted by his ghost. At the end of each night, the bellhop working at each platform had to ride through and make sure the attraction was running as it should. The problem was going to be for the workers that would be on platform D, otherwise known as Delta. With workers reporting flickering lights, cold spots, and consistent ride issues linked to the Delta floor. Some have even said that a ghostly figure would appear in the boiler room of the attraction. They'd see it out of the corner of their eye, but lose sight of it once they tried to look into it. The name Tower of Terror truly fits. Taking our number 4 spot, we have the underground tunnel. Beneath the Disney theme tracks, there lies the underground tunnel system, which is more formally known as the Disney Utilidor, short for Utility Corridor System. The system is part of Disney's backstage or behind the scenes area, where they allow Disney employees to move in and out of the park in secret, doing things like garbage transportation and hidden cast member relocations to protect the grand illusion Disney is trying to portray. If this tunnel tried to hide everything that could ruin the guest experience, then it's curious to think what other things they tried to hide. Workers that use the tunnel have reported hearing footsteps walking from a distance when no one is around, along with dark spots due to faulty lighting, and even hearing Walt Disney's voice himself in the tunnels. Now at our top 3 spot, we have Discovery Island. Discovery Island was an island located within the property of Disney in 1965. Originally, it was called Treasure Island, completed with the whole pirate theme, and then later turned into an animal resort where many could visit and view all of these different animals, flamingos, kangaroos, lemurs, just to name a few. Eventually, it would take the name Discovery Island, but after a while, Disney workers were accused of harming the animals within the island's boundaries. Even though nothing was confirmed, the island was shut down and abandoned completely, with all the animals being relocated. The legend goes that one day a man swam through the crocodile-infested water onto the island to snap photos and found some eerie things, including the lights being on in the abandoned water park, and he reported the feeling of being watched from potential Disney workers for trespassing or whatever unsettling sounds he heard from that island. Surprisingly, at our number 2 spot, we have human ashes in the Haunted Mansion. This one is a weird one. So apparently people would go to the Haunted Mansion in Disney and dump the cremated remains of the people they hold dearly in and around the mansion. I believe they do this because they want their loved ones in a place of joy. But what? Workers reported seeing these ashes scattered all around the mansion and would have the unfortunate duty to clean them up. Despite it being extremely creepy, illegal, and downright dangerous for people to do this, the haunted house attraction is said to be actually haunted now, due to the ashes of many people being all over the premise. The irony of the haunted house being actually haunted is very real. And now taking our number 1 spot at our top 10 scary Disney urban legends, we have Debbie Stone. At Disneyland, at a very famous ride called the Carousel of Progress, it was redesigned to become a new attraction named America Sings. And in 1974, an automated musical extravaganza that paid tribute to the musical history of America debuted, where audience members would get to see 6 different stages rotating to allow everyone to experience it in a sequence. There was one key issue in the system, however. As the ride rotated clockwise, all of the walls of the ride would press against one another. Unfortunately, a young woman by the name of Debbie Stone was set to perform, and as the stage rotated, she got crushed between the walls, passing away instantly.
Before we start, please no smoking or eating, and especially no flash photography here in our theater. Also, for your own personal safety, remain in your seats at all times, especially while the carousel.
Played a tune and sang it out. It sounded like a billy goat. Yankee Doodle liked the South, sang their song so dear. Thought they were most elegant for everyone to hear. Yankee Doodle singing up to Yankee Doodle bang. With fine music and the working in the song behind.
There have been Disney cast members claiming that they've seen a spirit and can hear a voice warning, "Be careful," at the unfortunate sight. Whether these rumors are believed or not, one thing is for sure. Debbie is guiding and helping others even through her death. We hope our list didn't prevent you from visiting the park, as it is truly a place of joy and entertainment. Just try not to think about the many spirits you encounter on these rides.
Number 10. The Little Mermaid. Disney has massively altered the original grim dark fable by Hans Christian Andersen, published in 1837. In the book, the nameless mermaid enters into a terrible pact. She allows her tongue to be cut out by a sea witch in exchange for legs. The witch ends up getting the Little Mermaid's sweet singing voice in return. Almost like the Disney version, but far worse. Once on land, the act of walking is extremely painful for the Little Mermaid, and the prince sees her as a kind of mute pet. She falls in love with him, but in the end, he marries someone else. The Little Mermaid learns her lesson and dies of a broken heart.
At our number 9 spot, we have Pinocchio. Pinocchio is a story of a wooden doll who is brought to life with the help of his friend Jiminy Cricket. Oh yeah, and if you haven't lived under a rock, you would know that when he lies, his nose gets bigger. Despite being a movie filled with good-hearted acts and heartfelt moments, the original story behind Pinocchio is much darker than that. The original writer, Carlo Collodi, had initially created the story of Pinocchio for Italian newspapers to show kids what would happen to them if they chose to act in any sort of rebellious way. In his iteration of Pinocchio, the doll is portrayed as a rebellious and annoying kid who is constantly being tortured in the story just for being bad. And for his green buddy, Jiminy Cricket, well, he was in the story as well and was giving Pinocchio some good advice, all until Pinocchio got mad and decided to smash him with a mallet. And an even darker twist to the tale, Pinocchio ends up being hung for the bad deeds he has committed. If we all knew about this, maybe the growing nose would not be as famous as it was.
Number 8. Snow White. In Little Snow White, as the original story was called, the evil queen asks the hunter to take Snow White into the forest to kill, as happens also in the movie. In the original version, the child is also only 7 years old, as opposed to Disney's 14-year-old. Neither seems old enough to consider marriage though. In the Grimm version, the queen orders the huntsman to bring back Snow White's internal organs, saying, "Kill her, and as proof that she is dead, bring her lungs and liver back to me." He kills a boar instead and brings back the queen the boar's lungs and liver, which the queen thinks belongs to Snow White and so promptly eats. The cook had to boil them with salt, and the wicked woman ate them, supposing that she had eaten Snow White's lungs and liver. Snow White and the prince fall in love and get married, even though Snow is only 7 years old, and the queen attends their wedding where she is met with her punishment of dancing to death. They put on a pair of iron shoes into burning coal, and they were brought forth with tongs and placed before her. She was forced to step into the red hot shoes and dance until she fell down dead.
At number 7 spot, we have the Hunchback of Notre Dame. This beloved Disney movie is set in 15th century Paris and follows the lives of a deformed bell ringer of Notre Dame Cathedral and his love interest La Esmeralda, who is a French Roma girl. This story with two physically appearing polar opposites combines tragedy with love and makes for a pretty good story in the end. But as for the others on this list, don't be deceived by the flashing lights and emotional stories, because its original depiction is one of the worst. The original story by Victor Hugo ends well for absolutely nobody in the movie. See, in the movie where Quasimodo and Frollo both fall in love with Esmeralda, but in Victor's story, Frollo frames Esmeralda for attempted murder and she gets sentenced to death by hanging. In both the movie and original story, Quasimodo beats Frollo, but in the original story, he gets pushed off a building because he's laughing hysterically at Esmeralda being hanged.
Number 6, we have Cinderella. We all know the classic story of Cinderella, but Cinderella doesn't actually have a fairy godmother. Rather, she plants a tree by her mother's grave and prays under it every day. She wears her dress to wear to each ball under the tree, and she's still helped by animals, though specifically birds, not mice. Also, she doesn't just lose her shoe because she's in a rush. The clever prince covers the steps in a pitch to make her stick to them, but she only loses a shoe in the process. One of Cinderella's evil stepsisters cuts off her toe and the other cuts off her heel so they can both fit into the tiny glass slipper. The prince is notified by the little doves that there's blood on the shoe, and he finally discovers the true owner is Cinderella. Once the stepsisters realize that, they try to favor Cinderella. They attend her wedding only to have their eyes pecked out by the little birds.
Right in the hump of our list, we have Pocahontas. This Disney movie portrays Pocahontas as being a free-willed woman whose best friend is a raccoon and her dad is a chief for her native tribe. The English arrive looking for gold and to claim territory, while Pocahontas finds her lover John, trying to bring peace to both sides. Classic native and early settler stuff, you know? And in the end of the movie, Pocahontas decides to stay with her tribe instead of going to England with John. However, the real story behind this is much more differently, so hopefully this doesn't ruin your childhood. In the original story, Pocahontas was never in love with John. In fact, she hated him with her guts because he would lie about everything that happened between the two. As mentioned in the movie, when John asked for Pocahontas to come back with him to England, she declines. But in the original story, John gets taken aback from this rejection, and this would ultimately lead to the Anglo-Powhatan Wars between the settlers of Virginia colony and the Algonquin Indians. Pocahontas would then get kidnapped and forced to indulge in English culture like Christianity and the English language. After a bit of time, she went back to her tribe in Virginia, but got really sick and passed away at the young age of 21. I told you I'd ruin it.
Number 4, Sleeping Beauty. In Giambattista Bastile's tale, which is the actual origin of Sleeping Beauty, a king happens to walk by Sleeping Beauty's castle and knocks on the door. When no one answers, he climbs up a ladder through a window and he finds the princess and calls her. But as she's unconscious, she does not wake up. He carries her to the bed and abuses her, then leaves. She awakens after she gives birth because one of her twins sucked the flax from the spindle out of her finger. The king comes back and they end up falling in love. However, the king is still married to someone else. His wife finds out and not only tries to have the twins killed, cooked, and fed to the king, but also tries to burn the princess at stake. Luckily though, she was unsuccessful. Then the king and the princess get married and they live happily ever after.
At our number 3 spot, we have Mulan. Mulan follows a young Chinese woman who looks to extend her boundaries and willingly disguises herself as a man to join the army to prove to her family and to herself that she can do anything she wants. In the war, she ultimately saves her father's life and brings honor to her family. After being told for over 1,500 years, the story has gotten extremely sugar-coated. Now in Hua Mulan's original poem, that which the movie is based on, it had them losing the war completely. The Khan allowed Mulan to live, but only if she lives with him, basically making her his own slave. So in the poem, she's as cunning as in the movie, and upon hearing this, she manages to escape and run back home. When she comes back home, however, she is met with the news that her father had passed away when she was gone and that her mother had remarried. The Khan then sends out men to find her, and as she finds no other solution to this problem, she takes her own life in order to be with her dad.
At number 2, we have Tangled. Tangled, it's a pretty loose adaptation of Rapunzel, but she ends up getting knocked up by the prince before they escape, and the evil sorceress figures it out. The sorceress cuts off Rapunzel's hair and throws her out into the wilderness. When the prince shows up to see her, the sorceress dangles Rapunzel's cut off hair to lure him in and tells him that he'll never see Rapunzel again. He ends up jumping out the window in despair and is blinded by the thorns below. He wanders around aimlessly, and Rapunzel ends up giving birth to twins, and he's eventually guided back to her when he hears her voice. Her tears restore his sight, then they return to the prince's kingdom and live happily ever after.
At our number 1 spot, we have Peter Pan. Peter Pan is about a magical boy who can fly without wings and fight without weapons. He travels from the Enchanted Isle of Neverland and various locations, all while being chased by his arch nemesis, Captain Hook. This movie is based on the story of J.M. Barrie. Peter Pan was actually based off of Barry's older brother, David. After an ice skating accident, his older brother, David, would tragically pass away, so he created Peter to keep the image of his brother alive. And he created the island of Neverland as a place for his brother to go to. This would have a lot of dark implications for the movie because Peter would always want to bring Wendy and her brothers to Neverland, and if Neverland is a place to go after you pass away, he's basically asking them to join him in the afterlife. At a number 10 spot, we have Frozen was a distraction. The rumor that Walt Disney's body was frozen after his death in 1996 is a persistent and enduring one that has captured the imagination of many people over the years. The theory originated from a claim by a reporter who said he had sneaked into a hospital where Disney passed away and saw the legendary animator's body in a cryogenic metal cylinder. Despite the lack of evidence, the rumor has persisted and even gained new life in recent years. Eventually, it even spawned a new theory suggesting that the Disney movie Frozen, which was released in 2013, was actually created as a distraction from the rumor that Disney's body was frozen. The theory is based on the idea that searches for Disney Frozen on Google, which tends to bring up information on the movie rather than the rumor, suggesting that the movie's title was chosen strategically to obscure the search results that were to be found if they searched up his frozen cryogenic body. While this theory may sound far-fetched, it is interesting to consider the enduring power of the rumor and the various ways in which it has been perpetuated and interpreted over the years. At our number 9 spot, we have Lilo's parents were CIA agents. One theory circulating online by Reddit user Kapukoa suggests that at least one one and possibly both of Lilo and Nani's parents were CIA agents. Let's just focus on the idea if Lilo's father was an agent. In the movie, when the Galactic Council comes to collect Stitch, the leader mentions that she recognizes the social worker Cobra Bubbles. You know, the big guy with glasses? Yeah, him. He then tells her that he was with the CIA at Roswell. Now, it seems unlikely that a CIA agent who was involved in an alien encounter would just walk away and become a social worker without any good reason. So this user suggested that a reason for his career change could be that Lilo's father wanted to keep an eye on his daughter and her sister and ensure that they were safe. This is all considering that Cobra Bubbles was her father's former partner or even a co-worker. But that's not all. In the movie, we see that Lilo has a particular obsession with taking photos of people around the island, specifically much larger people. It's possible that Lilo's father brought her on a low-risk surveillance assignment on the island using her as a cover of sorts. The theory suggests that the target of the assignment was an overweight person, something that Lilo distinctly remembers. Now she takes the same kind of photos as a way of remaining close to her deceased father. At number 8 spot, we have Moana was deceased for most of the movie. One Reddit user by the name of Dave Midrock suggests that Moana was not alive during most of the movie. So apparently there's a barrier between the normal human world and a magical otherworld, where all the creatures and figures from the Polynesian mythology exist. According to this theory, the only way to enter into the otherworld is to be part of it, specifically by being dead. The theory suggests that the storm at the beginning of the movie kills Moana and transports her into the otherworld. When Moana asks the ocean for help at the beginning of her journey, she is immediately hit by the storm and wakes up on Maui's island. The user claimed that the storm drove Moana to this destination and that the ocean helped her to reach the otherworld. As well, throughout the movie, Moana encounters various monsters and supernatural figures, but does not interact with any normal humans until the end of the film. This supports the idea that Moana is in the otherworld rather than the human world. Additionally, Moana and the chicken Hai survive various dangerous situations that would be impossible for a human or chicken to survive in the real world. The only time Moana is physically hurt in the movie is when she gets her foot stuck in the reef, which takes place before the storm, and while she is alive on her home island. As well, in the early drafts of the script, the realm of the monsters was referred to as the underworld, and Moana met her ancestors there. This adds further support to the idea that the otherworld is a place for the dead and that Moana was in it for much of the movie. At a number 7 spot, we have Finding Nemo is about the 5 stages of grief. A Reddit user by the name of Darklighter5000 suggests that Finding Nemo is actually a metaphor for the father's journey through the stages of grief. They say that Marlin imagines that one of his sons survived when in reality his whole family was destroyed in the beginning of the movie. So to begin, the father is in denial because he is unwilling to let his surviving son, aka Nemo, go to school because it's not safe. This represents a stage of denial in which a person refused to accept the reality of a situation. He basically creates a mental image of Nemo alive in his mind this whole time. As the movie progresses, the father moves through the different stages of anger and bargaining, as he immediately scolds Nemo for venturing out of his control, and bargaining when he eventually agrees to put up with a forgetful travel buddy in order to help him find his son, as we all know and love as Dory. These stages represent the father's attempts to cope with his grief and find a way to move forward. Eventually, the father reaches the stage of despair when he sees Nemo flush down the drain. This represents the depth of his grief and his sense of hopelessness. However, the movie ultimately ends with the father reaching the stage of acceptance. He finally learns to let go and accept things as they are, even though it ultimately means saying goodbye to his son. The Reddit user also suggests that the father's journey takes him to the land down under, which can be interpreted as the underworld, and that he must say goodbye to his son as he disappears into the void. On top of that, the name Nemo itself adds an additional layer of meaning to the story. In Latin, Nemo means nobody, which can be seen as a metaphor for the father's sense of loss and his inability to find his son. Food for thought. At a number 6 spot, we have Beauty and the Beast's Ugly Truth. In Disney's Beauty of the Beast, Reddit user Cheems Giara claims that a curse on the Beast and his castle has been in effect for 21 years when the film takes place. When the witch first placed the curse, she intended it for it to last 21 years, not for the Beast to be 21 years old. This means that the Beast is actually in his 40s, which is more in line with his character's actions and his demeanor. Before the events of the film, the Beast and his servants, including Lemire, tried to bring the girls to his castle in an attempt to break the curse. However, none of these girls were successful, and the Beast eventually lost hope and just stopped trying.
This would be why the furniture, including Lemire, hadn't put on a show or entertained guests for over 10 years. It's possible that something particularly disastrous happened around the 11th year of the curse, causing the beast to give up on trying to break it. As well, the castle was clearly prepared for the arrival of a girl, with a room set up for her and clothes in the wardrobe. This could suggest that other girls were held captive in the castle before Belle. The beast's surprise at Belle and not shuddering at his paw may also indicate that he has experienced rejection from other girls in the past. Despite these failed attempts to break the curse, the servants, including Lemire, still holds out hope that Belle will be the one to finally break it. After hearing about this, I don't know if I should feel more bad for the beast or if I should just be creeped out more. In the Humperella list, we have Aladdin is set in a post-apocalyptic wasteland. Reddit user by the name of Neuroplasm took a theory made on a 4chan post suggesting that the movie Aladdin takes place in a post-apocalyptic wasteland. They mentioned that in one scene of the movie, the genie calls Al's clothes, quote, so 3rd century. And if we dissect this, we have to understand that the genie has been supposedly trapped inside of the lamp for 10,000 years. So in reality, there's no possibility that he would have known the fashion trends then since he was trapped. This would mean that the latest time that genie was trapped was since the 3rd century. So if he spent 10,000 years since, he would be at least in the year 10,300 AD when he gets out. So this led the Reddit user to believe that the entire movie of Aladdin takes place in the future where only Arab culture and parts of Greek culture survived. The theory also suggests that the name Arabia has been corrupted to Agraba, and that the Muslim religion has a trophy to the point when there is no mosque, but people still give praise to Allah. The theory also suggests that the locals take for granted or consider magic the amazing technology marvels left behind by the previous civilization, like sentient flying carpets or genetically engineered parrots that comprehend human speech. At a number 4 spot, we have Peter Pan murders lost boys who grow up. Reddit user Morvis343 combined 2 theories about Neverland and combined them to make one brutal one. Their first theory suggests that Pan does not want the lost boys to grow up and kills them once they do. According to the user, Captain Hook and the pirates are former lost boys who escaped before Pan could kill them, suggesting that Pan is the villain of the story and that Hook is actually the good guy. The other theory proposes that Neverland is an afterlife for children who died young, and that Pan brings them to this special place to give them a proper childhood that they were denied in their earthly lives. So when the Reddit user combined these theories, they came up with the thought that instead of simply being an afterlife, perhaps Neverland is a waypoint on the way to the regular afterlife. Children die and are brought to Neverland by Pan, where they're given a chance to experience a full and whimsical childhood. However, once they grow up, it is time for them to move on to the regular afterlife. Pan then kills them and then sends them to their final destination, heaven. Captain Hook, however, escaped Neverland before he could understand this process. He believes that Pan is simply killing children for no reason and is locked in conflict with him as a result. However, the truth is that both Pan and Hook have the best intentions for the lost boys, with Pan wanting to give them a proper childhood and Hook wanting them to protect them from harm. Only Pan knows the truth about the eventual fate of the lost boys, but Hook is too stubborn to listen and consider the possibility. At a number 3 spot, we have inappropriate messages in Lion King. There is a rumor that the word sex appears in the scene from Disney's Lion King. According to the rumor, a 4-year-old boy noticed the appearance of the letters in the dust clouds created when Simba flops to the ground and told his mother or aunt about it. The child's mother or aunt then notified the American Life League, which is a religious organization that has been boycotting Disney films, and the rumor became the highlight of their September 1995 campaign against Disney videos allegedly containing sexual messages. The theory about the appearance of the letter sex in the dust clouds is disputed, with some people claiming that it is the power of suggestion or an international assertion of a special effects group. It is worth knowing that the letters seem readily apparent to those who are knowing what they're looking for, but people unfamiliar with the rumor rarely make them out, even after being told to look for it in the clouds for a little bit. The generally accepted explanation is that the letters were slipped in by a special effects group to form the abbreviation SFX as a joke, and the appearance of the word sex is purely coincidental. But is it really? At number 2 spot, we have Carl wasn't alive during the movie Up. Pixar's animated film Up tells the story of retired balloon salesman Carl Fredricksen, who embarks on a journey to the lost world of his childhood dreams by attaching thousands of balloons around his house. Along the way, he meets a young wilderness explorer named Russell, as well as a number of other colorful characters. However, according to a theory proposed by Reddit user known as Wolfie, there may be more to the story than meets the eye. The story suggests that Carl is actually dead throughout the film, and that his journey to Paradise Falls is a metaphor for his move into the afterlife. afterlife. According to the theory, Russell is an angel trying to help Carl transition into the afterlife, while Charles Muntz, the film's main antagonist, is a fallen angel who is determined to drag Carl to the underworld with the help of his hellhounds. This interpretation of the film suggests that it is a deeper exploration of the themes of death and the afterlife, and the role that angels may play in guiding us through that journey. At the number 1 spot, with Andy's mom owned Jessie and then forgot about her. In Toy Story 2, Jessie is introduced as a jaded cowgirl with a fear of abandonment. She was neglected by her old owner Emily for years before being discarded into a donation bin. Despite learning to trust again and become happy as Andy's toy, Jessie never really gets any real closure with Emily. There's a theory that suggests that Emily is actually Andy's mom all grown up. This theory is supported by the fact that Emily and Andy have similar appearances, and that Andy's old red hat looks like a larger version of Jessie's hat, which we all know Emily also had. This theory is significant because it suggests that Emily doesn't remember Jessie in the same way that Jessie remembers Emily. Emily was a beloved toy for a brief period, but then was forgotten and left to die, while Jessie had a difficult time letting go. This realization would likely be devastating for Jessie if she knew the truth. Imagine you had an incredible evening with someone you thought was the most wonderful person you've ever met, and you thought about them for years, only to discover that they couldn't recall the night at all. That's the kind of relationship Emily has with her discarded toy, Jessie. The lack of closure and understanding of Emily's actions is likely to be a source of emotional turmoil for Jessie. The toys in the Toy Story franchise are manufactured with souls, or are they possessed by ghosts? Or what is the deal here? These questions are never answered in these movies, leaving us with more questions than answers. Regardless, it is clear that Jessie's past with Emily is a painful one and resolved part of a story, and one that will likely haunt her for the remainder of her time.
Number 10, Jack Jack. This theory is wild and kind of fun. Pixar has a history of throwing in Easter eggs from all around their films into their newest projects. One of the most famous is A113. A113 is an animator's inside joke. It refers to a classroom number at the California Institute of the Arts where many of the Pixar folks got their start. The number has worked its way into nearly every Pixar movie, from the license plate on Andy's SUV in the Toy Story series, to a Roman numeral in Brave, to a movie marquee in Incredibles 2. Speaking of the Incredibles franchise, the first number on the list is referring to Jack Jack. In the Incredibles 2, another Pixar film, baby Jack Jack Parr has some cool superpowers and can teleport to other dimensions. During his teleportation, a fan theory goes, Jack Jack visited characters from Monsters Inc. At one point in Monsters Inc., a monster says, "A kid flew over me and blasted a car with his laser vision." One of Jack Jack's powers is laser vision. This is kinda creepy because I feel like Jack Jack could legitimately pull a Homelander from The Boys and laser all of the monsters in half. Let's just hope he doesn't get into the monster world. Number 9, time moves slower in the monster universe. Redditor Adam Simon noted that time might be experienced differently in the Monsters Inc. universe. The theorist points to several different facts to back up his idea. Among them, Boo's voice is more mature sounding at the end of the film than in its beginning. Sully seems surprised to see Boo at the end of the movie, and we as the audience do not get to see what she looks like. And if monsters can slow time, it explains why they always elude parents. This could lead to many questions. How long do monsters stay in university if time moves slower for them? Could you imagine doing 8 years because time moves slower? I don't think I'd survive in that world. Number 8, toys are sentient. One theorist explained his reasoning for his theory about toys being sentient in the Monsters universe. It all apparently shows itself in the opening sequence, which introduces us to the basic mechanics of how monsters scare children. The monster, Mr. Bile, sneaks into a child's room and attempts to scare him, but the kid wakes up and sees him. We see that Mr. Bile is actually more scared of the kid than vice versa, and he trips and falls for comedic effect. This of course is a simulation, a demonstration of how not to scare a kid, so that the movie can cut to Sully, our main character, who is the best scarer at Monsters Incorporated. The simulation we just watched was at the factory, and it's our setup for everything that happens next in the movie, something that has bugged a lot of people, including myself, in a major goof that transpires during the simulation. When Mr. Bile walks in, we get a clear shot of the room's layout and where everything is located. The soccer ball is under the bed, the toy train and its tracks are at the foot of the bed, and one of the books near the window hangs over the edge. But as the scene changes, everything moves around. The soccer ball inexplicably moves to the side of the bed. It's in a totally different location, and it eventually shows up again at the foot of the bed where the train tracks have disappeared. Instead, there's a bunch of jacks in its place. Mr. Bile steps back on the soccer ball and falls on the jacks like we're watching a better version of Home Alone 3. We even see that the books on the toy box have moved a little bit, but they return to their original spot toward the end of the scene. Could this be continuity errors, or are the toys in the universe really alive? Number 7, Boo is the witch from Brave. This one is actually really big. This fan theory has gained a lot of traction, and with good reason. It states that Boo in Monsters, Inc. is the old witch in the Pixar film Brave. Brave is set in Scotland during the Dark Ages, and the old witch is old, so time travel is required for this theory to fly. But according to John Negroni, author of the Pixar theory, the signs are all there. The keys to the witch's magic are will-o'-the-wisps, which she uses to employ her magical abilities. Negroni wrote, "The theory is that Boo discovered a way to use doors to travel through time on her own, possibly by developing magic on her own. She probably went back in time to the Dark Ages to get more magic from the will-o'-the-wisps. And why would she do that? To find her childhood friend Sully." Further fuel for this theory, in Brave, a wood carving of Sully is visible in the witch's workshop. Number 6, the monsters don't think humans are dangerous. Just as some fans believe there is ample evidence of humans being perilous to monsters, other theories point to the exact opposite. It's only a ruse established by the Child Detection Agency to keep the children of the world from getting scared. Redditor CyberHusky58 noted that when Randall and Waternoose's plot is exposed, Agent Number 1, who is undercover as Roz from the CDA, enters the scene. Not only is she not at all concerned about the presence of a human, but she lets Sully spend time with Boo. So perhaps humans are not unsafe in the least, and the CDA is only trying to protect the human children from becoming frightened. And of course, denying kids their screams means the monsters would lose their power source, so win-win for the humans? But if they really aren't scared of the humans and that info could get out, the whole corporation could be shut down, leading to a major power outage in the monsters universe. I kind of want to see a dystopian apocalypse movie with Sully and Mike as the main characters now. Imagine that. Number 5, the monsters travel back in time to scare the kids. So there are no more humans on Earth or something. Perhaps they traveled to space, and Earth was abandoned, or they all nuked themselves into oblivion. What do the monsters do now? Are they supposed to just revert back to the monster Stone Age and scare each other for power? Well, this theory says no siree. This theory, posited by John Negroni in his book The Pixar Theory, states that the monsters actually travel back in time to scare the kids. That way, no matter what the humans do to doom themselves or move themselves off of Earth, the monsters will always have their source of power. Number 4, Monstropolis is the afterlife for the forgotten imaginary friends mentioned in Inside Out. In Inside Out, we learn that everything forgotten gets dropped into the memory dump, then disappears forever. Bing Bong, Riley's imaginary friend, has his wagon thrown into the memory dump, but where does it end up? Redditor Ice Metal Punk theorized that the monsters in Monster Inc. are actually the imaginary friends that human kids forgot as they grew up. The creatures had to learn to live together and form a functioning society. That would make everything much, much darker. It would also give the monsters a motive other than power to scare the kids. Perhaps they want revenge for the kids abandoning them and forgetting all about them. It also would make sense why all of the monsters are odd looking. Some of them look pretty friendly. Number 3, time moves faster in the monsters universe. There's a theory that time moves faster in the monsters world. Redditor Ali, Gali laid out the case. First, the monsters can scare hundreds of kids in a single time zone at the same time, which seems to imply that they can accomplish several hours worth of work in what feels like a short span to humans. Second, in the chase scene, Sully and Mike enter the human world and dart from closet to closet within just a few different houses. But Randall's place between doors and time passing outside the factory seems to suggest that these events are happening over a while. Also, banishment to the human world appears to be a significant fear for the monsters, perhaps because time moves so slowly for them in the human realm. Number 2, the monsters evolved from the animals that took over the world after WALL-E. This idea, part of John Negroni's theory of a unified Pixar universe, suggests that the monsters in Monsters Inc. were the natural production of evolution, developing from the animals that took over the planet after humans deserted it in the events that preceded the plot of WALL-E. Monsters Inc. then actually takes place in a super distant future, long after what transpires in WALL-E. This is somewhat plausible if you also agree with the theory that they travel back in time to scare the kids. Number 1, the monsters saw the plague. At first, it seems like the monsters fear a war scenario with the humans, where contamination by the alien microbes of the human world could wipe them out. But Sully and Mike's immunity to Boo seems to discredit this. However, if the doors are able to travel across time, it's entirely possible that at some point, one or several monsters traveled back to the 14th century on a scare mission. For instance, if they visited Europe around 1348, they could have entered the bedroom of a highly infectious victim of the plague, possibly even a room stacked with plague-ridden corpses. If the infection spread to them, even hairy beasts would be right to be petrified. After all, experiencing huge blood-filled boils, intense pain, fever, diarrhea, and passing isn't anyone's idea of fun. With that risk factor, you'd think they'd seek an alternative energy source rather than using only children's screams.
Coming in at a number 10 spot, we have Woody is Evil. Toy Story is a beloved franchise that has captured the hearts of audiences of all ages. Among the colorful cast of characters that make up the world of Toy Story, Woody the Cowboy is perhaps one of the most beloved. However, a Reddit user by the name of Itchy Rabbit has put forth a fascinating theory that challenges the way we view Woody as a character. This theory proposes that Woody is not so different from Lotso, which is the evil bear from Toy Story 3, and that the only thing that saved Woody from turning evil like Lotso was the fact that he had a kid, Andy, who loved and played with him. The Reddit user argues that if Andy had brought a new Woody toy in the first movie, then Woody would have turned out just like Lotso, hurt, bitter, angry, and just wanted revenge on the world. Both Woody and Lotso are leaders who go through a lot to try to get back their respective kids, and the only thing that separates them is the fact that Woody has Andy. This theory challenges the notion that Woody is a perfect, flawless character, and points to his darker side that is hinted at in the first movie when he starts to feel like he's being replaced by the newer, shinier Buzz Lightyear toy. While everything turns out alright for Woody in the end, the Reddit user suggests that in a parallel universe, there may be a Toy Story where Woody is the evil toy that needs to be overthrown. At a number 9 spot, we have Andy's dad. If you're a fan of Toy Story, you definitely know Andy, who is the young boy who owns the beloved toys, Woody, Buzz, and the whole gang. But have you ever wondered about the absence of Andy's father? Well, there's a theory that suggests his father passed away and that his loss is what drives Andy to become so attached to his toys in the first place, particularly Woody, who, as the theory goes, was owned by his father. To give some context, Woody is a rare and valuable toy from a 50s TV show called Woody's Roundup. This is why he is stolen in the second film. But how did Andy, a 6-year-old in the first film, get his hands on such a prized possession? The theory speculates that Woody was actually owned by Andy's father, and because his father had passed away, that's why Andy had such a strong connection to him. Supporting this theory is a scene in the second Toy Story movie when Andy's mom tells the owner of Al Toys Barn that Woody is not for sale because he is a family possession. Additionally, we know that Andy's dad had polio as a kid, which can have long-term effects on baby boomers later in life. It's possible that complications from the disease could have been fatal for Andy's father, and all of Andy's father's belongings, aside from the new toys, were burnt because of polio, making Woody, Mr. Potato Head, and Slinky Dog the only possessions that survived. Interestingly, the name Andy on the bottom of Woody's foot is actually a reference to Andy's father, whose name was Andy Sr. All of these clues and details add up to the theory that Woody was owned by Andy's father and that this loss is what drives Andy's attachment to him in the first place. Coming in at our number 8 spot, we have a war. A Reddit user by the name of Space Communist has put forward a fascinating theory about the underlying theme of the movies that explains why the world in the Toy Story franchise changes so dramatically over time, and there is a potential evidence here for a war. The theory suggests that the first 2 movies are set during the space race in the 1960s. This is evident in the technology and toys that are featured in the films, such as Buzz Lightyear, who is modeled after the astronauts of the time. However, there is a significant time jump between Toy Story 2 and Toy Story 3, which takes place in a world with laptops, online gaming, and modern cars. This leap in technology seems to be too significant for just a decade to pass. The Reddit user suggests that a world war took place over the course of these movies. The technology advanced so rapidly during the war that it explains the leap we see between the movies. The proof of this theory can be seen in the maps that are featured in the movies as well. The maps seem to show the world map as very different from ours, with countries not being the same and borders being all over the place. And if you look closely, it definitely looks like a massive war took place, which would explain the significant changes in technology and the world we see in Toy Story 3. While this theory may seem far-fetched, it is not entirely impossible. After all, we are talking about a world in which toys can talk, Coming in at our number 7 spot, we have Sid's abused life. Another popular theory focuses on the character of Sid, who everyone knows is the villain in the first movie. Some fans believe that Sid wasn't a bad kid at all, but rather a product of a poor home life. One reason for this is that the dangerous rocket toy that Sid is seen playing with may have been ordered by his parents, who didn't care that he was too young to play with it. Additionally, there is a scene in the movie that shows Sid's father passed out in front of the TV with Coca-Cola cans all over the floor. Interestingly, some fans believe that Sid later became a garbage man and that he did so in order to save all the forgotten toys from being incinerated at the city dump. This theory is supported by a scene in Toy Story 3 where a garbage man is seen wearing the same shirt that Sid wore as a child. You saw that photo? Fans speculate that Sid changed his ways after learning that toys could talk and that he wanted to make amends for his past behavior by instead giving love to the toys that wouldn't otherwise receive it. Coming in at our number 6 spot, we have corpses. A Twitter user by the name of Stigib3 tweeted a theory that has sent shockwaves throughout the Toy Story fandom. According to the tweet, Stigib3's daughter suggested that if one of the toys died, Andy wouldn't know and would continue to play with its corpse. The tweet went viral and sparked a conversation about the dark implications of the theory. While there may have been theories about how the toys in Toy Story came to life, the idea that they have a limited lifespan only to be played with as a lifeless corpse is particularly disturbing. Fans of the franchise are now left to grapple with the possibility that their beloved characters could meet such a grim fate, and next time you watch this movie, you're probably gonna wonder if one of these people are actually a corpse. In the hump of our list, we have mutants. Have you ever watched the first Toy Story movie and wondered about those creepy mutant toys that Sid created? You might have found comfort in the fact that they were just made up for the movie, but what if we told you that they may actually exist in real life? In the 1990s, the Unknown Museum in Marin, California held an exhibition that featured a range of odd and unusual toys. The Toy Story animators saw this exhibition and were inspired by what they saw, leading them to create their own versions of the mutant toys for the movie. That means that the designs for those creepy toys were based on real life toys. So somewhere out there, tucked away in a dark and dusty box, those mutant toys may really exist, waiting to be discovered. It's a creepy thought, but it's also a testament to the creativity of these Toy Story animators who were able to get inspiration from real life and turn it into a magical and unforgettable experience. Shout out to them. Number 4, Wheezy is evil. Watch Toy Story for a second time and keep an eye on Wheezy to see if there's any truth to this next theory. The theory goes that while we see Al from Al's Toy Barn as the main villain in Toy Story 2, it's actually Wheezy who's the mastermind behind everything. He's a toy who has been forgotten and left on a shelf, and he's bitter about it. While he sees Woody, who's still loved and played with, he decides to take matters into his own hands. Wheezy's plan is to get Woody out of the way so he can become Andy's favorite toy. He knows that Woody is the leader of the toys and that if you can get rid of him, the other toys will be easy to manipulate. So he orchestrates a plan to get Woody sold at a yard sale, where he can be snatched up by a toy collector and then taken way far away. That theory is supported by some of Wheezy's actions in the movie. For example, he is the one who tells Woody about the yard sale in the first place, and he seems almost too eager to get rid of him. He also doesn't seem too upset when Woody is taken away, which is strange for a toy who's supposed to be his friend. Of course, this theory is just speculation, and there's no concrete evidence to support it. It's possible that Wheezy is just a lovable character who got a raw deal in life, but it does add a very interesting layer to this story. All the way down to number 3 spot, we have Similar Faces. In 2017, The Mirror shared a story that pointed out a peculiar detail in the original Toy Story movie that some people may have missed. The children in the movie, including Andy and his friends, all have very similar faces. Have you noticed? Some viewers have even noticed that the children look almost identical to each other and to Andy's neighbor, Sid, who enjoys torturing toys. This has led to some interesting theories about what this could mean. Some people speculate that the similarity in the children's faces were simply a product of animation limitations at the time. While Pixar's animations have held up well over the years, they may have not been able to create as much variety in the humans' faces as they would have liked. However, others believe that there is something more significant going on. Some suggest that the humans in the movie are actually the toys and that what we perceive as the toys are really living people. This theory could explain why the toys are able to move and talk, but it also raises other questions as well. So really, I don't know what to believe anymore. Number 2, immortality. According to a theory circulating online, the reason why we keep getting Toy Story movies is that the toys can only die if they are crushed or burned. Otherwise, they continue to live out the same life cycle over and over again, forgetting their old owners and then starting anew with new children. It's a haunting idea, but it does make sense given the evidence presented in the films. For example, we know that Woody, Jessie, and Bullseye all originate from the 50s and could potentially be toys that were kept in mint condition, thus preserving their lifespan. And if you're a believer in the grand Pixar theory, you might be interested to know that Rex the dinosaur, who has been a beloved character in the Toy Story movies, also appears in the film WALL-E. But it's not just a toy dinosaur that's the same model as Rex in Toy Story. It's actually a Rex, who has lived through the years witnessing humanity's demise. This theory adds a completely different dread to a franchise that's meant to be enjoyed by kids and adults alike. It forces us to consider what it's truly like to live and to come to terms with our own mortality. But it's a testament to the depth and complexity of this story, and for all I know, it could be true. At number 1 spot, we have a genocide. Before I mention this point, it's one of the darkest about the show, but it is a theory out there, so I just have to mention it. One of the darkest theories about Toy Story is a comparison made by John Hoffman of UGO between the toys and the Holocaust. Hoffman suggests that the toys being abandoned by Andy for college is similar to Jewish people being abandoned by countries as the Third Reich began to spread across Europe. Woody gathers the toys to form a plan, and they refuse to be abandoned and give up. Buzz Lightyear steps forward and suggests they hide in an attic, drawing parallels to many Jewish people who tried to hide from the Germans in the attics, like Anne Frank and her family. However, the darkest comparison is that being taken to Sunnyside Daycare is akin to a concentration camp, where they found themselves trapped among others in the same situation. While this comparison is truly disturbing and perhaps unnecessary, it exists online and continues to be talked about by those who are willing to delve into this dark theory. So if you want to know more, just search it up and read it yourself online before I get in too much trouble for telling too much. At a number 10 spot, we have Poohs Real Dad. In the show, we are introduced to Cosmo and Wanda's kid, Poof. But is it really theirs? As we see from other related fairies, they typically share characteristics to those they are related to. For example, Wanda and Blonda share similar pink eyes, while Cosmo and his mom share similar shades of green. Except when we look at Poof, there is no resemblance to either Cosmo or Wanda. Instead, Poof shares similar characteristics to another fairy we know, Juandissimo. So for those who don't know, fairies are able to have babies by using magic. Yet not any other way, you freaks. So when they try to make a baby, they notice that Cosmo was infertile, and instead the magic used Juandissimo's genetics to create Poof. Number 9, Trixie has her own fairy. So that Trixie is hiding a big secret in the show the whole time, and that is that she has her own fairy godparent. If you ever decide to pay attention to each person's eyes in the show, it will begin to tell you a lot about it. For example, if we look at Timmy's eyes, we will begin to notice he has blue eyes and no pupils. And this goes with his parents, Trixie, Mr. Crocker, and even Vicky. They all have single color eyes with no pupils. Then turn to look at Cosmo and Wanda's eyes, and you begin to notice they have a distinct pupil. Then if we look at every other fairy introduced in the show, we will notice that every single one of them has pupils as well. Basically, this confirms that fairies have pupils. But then there's Trixie's best friend, Veronica. And when we look into her eyes, we will notice that she also has pupils. So basically, Veronica is Trixie's own fairy, but she chooses to disguise herself as a best friend, and it seems to work out. I mean, we all know that Timmy hides Cosmo and Wanda in various shapes and forms to fit in. So what makes you say that a best friend is not a good disguise? Number 8, all imagined by an abused boy. A very famous theory online is that the entire show is imagined inside of a little boy's head. Except in this case, the image is the product of a household of abuse and depression. This is a very sad turn from the show, but it's a dark theory regardless, so here you guys go. This theory proposes that fairies and magic are all made up inside of an abused kid's head. The kid has neglectful parents who couldn't care less about them, and the only adults that would be open-minded to this kid were the grandparents. However, they had passed away, causing the little boy to play pretend with his 2 fishies. This is because he finds comfort in imagining they're there to watch over him like his grandparents did. When the parents send in the babysitter, the kid is helpless against her and instead imagines doing magic. And this would make sense because in the show, magic was really never having lasting effects. Number 7, Trixie's parents are corrupt officials. Trixie Tang is back on this list, and for all the wrong reasons. Trixie is not only the most popular and possibly the most wealthiest girl in town, she is also a spoiled brat that likes to brag about her possessions or achievements any moment she gets. And as they say, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. So let's see what her parents are like in order to have a kid like this. Reddit user by the name of Cosmic Biohazard brought up the theory that her parents are former corrupt government officials, which explains her child's invasive behaviors. This user brings up the Chinese term Fior Dai, I am so sorry if I mispronounced that, which was used to describe the children of parents who became extremely wealthy during the country's economic boom in the 90s. Number 6, Timmy Turner had a twin. So many theorists believe that fairies didn't exist the entire show. And they wouldn't be so wrong to think that. Many characters, specifically the adults, have no awareness that fairies exist. As well, it would explain why after every episode, everything goes back to normal and nothing ever changes permanently. Sometimes. Now let's say that fairies don't exist. Then what can Cosmo and Wanda be morphing into that appears to be either green or pink? Now let's go back to one of the older episodes where we have Timmy and his family moving in, but in the back of their move-in truck, it's filled with pink items that are clearly labeled girl, and even Timmy's hat is appearing in it. So what explains all the green items that Cosmo transforms into? Well, the theory tells us that Timmy's parents were initially expecting a single daughter, but instead they got twins, a boy and a girl. As they were growing up, something tragic happened along the way, causing the girl to pass away. Shocked by the events, Timmy grew up feeling as if he was missing another half, which would explain why he sees his made-up fairies to be in the colors of green and pink, in order for him to cope with his grief process. Number 5, how magic works. So the multiverse is apparently everywhere, and I even found a theory of that in the Fairly Odd Parents. A now deleted Reddit user brought up the theory about the true capabilities of a fairy's powers. Not only can they grant wishes for their godchildren, but this user said that they have the ability to travel into infinite amount of universes in order to grant these wishes. I mean, we can't lie. Some of these wishes are completely absurd and are highly controversial, whether or not we wonder how it would affect the show as a whole. But they end up never doing that. As I mentioned in another point, at the very end of every episode, everything comes back to normal. Well, most of the time. But having the ability to grant wishes in different universes explains why other kids' wishes have no effect on Timmy, but only other versions of him. This would also explain why everyone in the show seems to be oblivious to the things happening around them, let alone the fairies. Number 4, Cosmo and Wanda are antidepressants. Yes, these magical fairies are theorized to be a metaphor for antidepressants. Antidepressants in a show? What? Yes, Cosmo and Wanda are apparently metaphors for Zoloft and Prozac. And for those who don't know, these are 2 very potent prescription medications that are used to treat depression, anxiety, and other related issues. And let's face it, Timmy doesn't have the best life by any means. And with all this being said, despite the fact that he is a kid, it wouldn't be far off to believe he relied on prescription drugs to help with his struggles, especially in the future. This would also explain why the fairy godparents were only around him when Timmy really needed them, like when he's sad or has an issue. Number 3, the Dinglebergs represents Timmy's dad's dream life. The competition between Mr. Turner and Dingleberg happens throughout the entire series, it seems. However, many of you don't know that they were actually friends in high school until a girl set the 2 friends apart. Eventually, Mr. Turner would just grow more and more jealous to Dingleberg, especially after he started to become more successful. As Mr. Turner continued his dead-end job sharpening pencils, he would always have this inner hatred towards Dingleberg. Reddit user by the name of Kick-Ass Setter believed that Dinglebergs are a play on the term dink, which means double income, no kids. Mr. Turner then compared his life with Dingleberg, especially when he has a kid like Timmy Turner. I'm not saying Mr. Turner hates Timmy, but he just resents the life of what could have been if he had no child like Dingleberg. Number 2, Timmy doesn't need fairies. According to Negroni, the show's main theme is, quote, you don't really grow up until you figure out how to properly deal with your problems. One thing that bothers me about TFO, and it probably bothers you too, is that Timmy Turner learns the same lesson every single week. This lesson is that you just can't wish your problems away. Every time you do, you end up creating more problems. And even in a world where you can get everything you want, there are still rules, terms, and conditions that will hold you back. Which brings me to the true purpose of Fairly Odd Parents. It's not simply to give us a show where we can laugh at the misfortunes of a 10-year-old boy who has the world at his fingertips. It's to show us that fairy godparents aren't really there to just give Timmy whatever he wants. Instead, the whole point of giving Timmy fairy godparents is to teach him that he doesn't need them. Number 1, fairies rule the entire world. A Reddit user by the name of Hey Luda You Like to Eat talked about a theory claiming that fairies rule the entire world in the show. They started off by mentioning the two reoccurring themes we see in the show, which are a child's imagination and neglectful parents. Timmy's parents aren't the only ones who are neglectful, however. When we begin to look at the entire town of Dimmsdale, most of the parents are strictly there for comedic purposes, and they usually lack awareness and common sense. One Reddit user placed the blame on an object in the show called memory wipers. This was first introduced in the episode named The Secret Origin of Denzel Crocker. In the episode, Crocker was introduced to a child with fairies, and this is where his persona basically comes from. After seeing the fairies, he immediately gets his mind wiped by this device, and it just didn't stop there. The device was used more and more on him until it decided to transform his body, and this is where Mr. Crocker developed his infamous twitch and obsession with fairies. Back to fairies ruling the world, and now we know the capabilities of this device. This Reddit user continued by saying that fairies only help children and wipe the memories of adults because they're trying to strip the intellect away from the world.